All right, guys. What really happened?
If the FBI is leading this investigation, that they're leading a credible investigation, because there's some of us sitting up here today that don't have a lot of confidence in the FBI. So I will repeat the question. Have the investigators reconstructed the shooter's precise moments over the past days, weeks, and months?
I understand your question, Chairman, and I share your concerns about wanting to make sure that we have factual information. The FBI is conducting a criminal investigation. The Secret Service is conducting an internal investigation. There are a number of OIG investigations, and there is the external investigation.
Okay.
The president
last question for me. Before July 13th, had the Trump detail requested additional resources?
What I can tell you is that for the event on July 13th, the details that were the assets that were requested for that day were given.
Okay. My time has expired. Chair now recognizes ranking member asking for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been reported that before former President Trump got up on the stage at around 6 p.m. on Saturday, July 13th, that the local police had identified and even photographed a man who was acting suspiciously. And this man, who turned out to be the gunman, had been flagged as a potential threat. Is that accurate?
What I
Yes, is accurate.
can say is that the individual was identified as suspicious.
So he was known to be suspicious before former President Trump took the stage.
That is the information I have received.
Why was he allowed to take the stage with a suspicious person having been identified in the crowd?
So I appreciate the question, and I'd like to make 2 points. If the detail had been passed information that there was a threat, the detail would never have brought the former president out onto stage. That is what we do, and that is who we are. We are charged with protecting all of our protectees.
So you distinguish between someone who is suspicious and someone who's threatening, is that right?
I do. There are a number of times at protective events where suspicious people are identified. Those individuals have to be investigated and determined what is it that identifies that person as suspicious.
So did you deny a request for additional resources that had been made by the Trump campaign?
There were no assets denied for that event in Butler on the 13th.
I see. So you're saying there were requests made for additional assistance for other specific events rather than for the campaign as a whole. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
Well, you seem to say that there were not additional resources requested for that event. And forgive me for being unfamiliar with this. Is it requested event by event, or is it requested just in general for the campaign?
So if I can explain the advance process.
Please.
When an event or a venue is identified by, in this case, campaign staff, then the campaign staff works together with Secret Service agents who go out and conduct an advance. Generally, that is a 5-day time period where those discussions are had about what the perimeter is going to look like, what the size of the event is, what the venue is. And then from there, there is a request made to mitigate potential risk and threat. And I'm saying that on that day, the requests that were pushed forward were granted.
So the Secret Service did not know that the gunman actually had a weapon before President Trump was allowed to get up on the stage?
To the best of our knowledge and the facts that we have at this point, that is correct.
So can you answer this question, which I think is on the mind of most Americans thinking about this? How can a 20-year-old with his father's AR-15 assault weapon climb onto a roof with a direct 150-yard line of sight to the speaker's podium without the Secret Service or local police stopping him?
So again, sir, I will say we are 9 days out from this event, and I would like to know those answers as well, which is why we are going through these investigations to be able to determine that fully. Okay.
It's been reported that the shooter was not carrying a driver's license or any form of identification. They had no idea who he was, but then he was quickly identified, I think within 30 minutes, by using the serial number on the AR-15 under a tracing system that is now controversial. Some people say we should get rid of it. Some people want to keep it. But is that right that the serial number was the key information which led to the identification of the shooter?
That is my understanding,
Was-
sir, yes.
Okay.
What?
If
Hell no.
if an American citizen were just to stop you and say, Director Cheadle, we support your work to the tune of billions of dollars and thousands of employees, what went wrong? What would you say?
Again, knowing that we're 9 days out, I would say, as I have said from the very outset, I accept responsibility for this tragedy. We are going to look into how this happened, and we are going to take corrective action to ensure that it never happens again.
You
Well,
finna get
I
fired.
appreciate that. And I hope you will act with vigor and focus and intensity. And it seems you understand the gravity and solemnity of this to the American people. Millions and millions of Americans don't feel safe with all the AR-15s out there. We thought at least the president of the United States or a former president of the United States would be safe, but now that's not even clear. Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you.
Gentleman, yields back. Chair now recognizes Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, were you guessing or lying? The day after President Trump is shot, Secret Service spokesman
Whoa.
Anthony
He just came in hot. He said, was you guessing or lying? Which one? What you doing?
Guglielmi said, quote, the assertion that a member of the former president's security team requested additional security resources that the U.S. Secret Service or the Department of Homeland Security rebuffed is absolutely false. The next day, Secretary Mayorkas said that is an unequivocally false assertion. We had not received any request for additional security measures that were rebuffed. But 5 days later, the Washington Post said this.
Oh, he on your ass. He not about to let up. He on your ass. Get ready, cause he coming in hot. Get the landing strip ready, baby.
Top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel. The next day, the New York Times said this. Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail. So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President?
I told y'all, look, he put his hand up. He like, look, what the hell y'all doing over there? I want to know. Tell the people what they need to know, okay?
President Trump's detail.
Neither, sir, and I appreciate the question.
Well, what were you doing? Because those statements don't jive.
So what I can tell you is that for the
Hold on, how you wasn't doing neither? You was doing something.
event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied. As far as requests,
Well, maybe they got tired of asking. Maybe you turned them down so darn much, they said, not worth asking. How many times did you turn them down ahead of that?
I think that it is important to distinguish between what some people may view as a denial of an asset or a request.
Boy, he mad as hell. Boy, he losing hell over this shit. Y'all better stop fucking with him. I'm telling you. Was it Mr. Jordan? Michael Jordan? Boy, he
Well,
going
Mr.
hard.
Guglielmi, your spokesperson? He said he acknowledged the Secret Service had turned down some requests. I'm asking how many?
A denial of a request does not equal a vulnerability.
Well, tell me what it is.
There are a number of ways that threats and risks can be mitigated with
Yeah.
a number of different assets, whether that be through personnel, whether that be through technology or other resources.
Well, tell the committee which it was. They asked for additional help in some form or another. You told them no. How many times did you tell them no, and what'd you tell them no to?
Again, I cannot speak to specific incidents, but I can tell you in general terms, the Secret Service is judicious with their resources based on.
What does some requests mean? How many times? Some indicate requests is plural. So more than once they asked for additional help and you turned them down. What did they ask for and how many times did you turn them down? Pretty basic questions.
So again, without having all of the details in front of me, sir, what I can tell you is that there are
You
times.
didn't get briefed on how many times you turned down the Trump detail when they asked for additional help?
I'm sorry.
You didn't get briefed on that before you came to this hearing, knowing you were going to get asked that question?
What I can tell you is that in generic terms,
No.
when people, when details make a request, there are times that there are alternate ways
Put your glasses back on.
to cover off on that threat or that risk.
But that's not what he said. He said they were denied certain requests, some requests. This is
I-
your spokesperson, not me talking. This is the Secret Service talking.
I
And, what a change from absolutely false, unequivocally false to, oh, by the way, there were some times where we didn't give them what they wanted. That's a huge change in 5 days. And the fact that you can't answer how many times you did that, that's pretty darn frustrating, not just for me, but for the country.
I hear your frustration.
Let me ask you this. Were any of those requests denied to President Trump's detail after you knew about the Iranian threat?
What I can tell you, again, I don't know the specifics, is that there are times when we can fill a
Boy, I promise you, this is like watching one of them podcasts and they be debating. Wow. Amazing.
request. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a Secret Service asset or resource. We can fill that request with locally available assets.
You
and
spoke to anyone at the
resources.
White House since July 13th?
Yes, I have.
Who'd you talk to?
I have briefed the president and the vice president.
Talk to the First Lady?
No, I have not.
Talk to the White House staff? Anyone in the White House communications?
No, I have not.
Have you talked to the counter sniper who took the shot that took out the bad guy?
Yes, I have.
And can you tell us about that conversation?
I would not want to reveal conversations that I've had with my employees.
But that's exactly the kind of information the American people want to know. American people who pay your salary.
I understand this is an ongoing investigation. And
Who's all doing the investigating at Secret Service? I know the Inspector General, but is there also an internal investigation in addition to the Inspector General?
We are conducting a mission assurance investigation internally, yes.
You know what it looks like, Director? It looks like you won't answer some pretty basic questions. It looks like you got a 9% raise and you cut corners when it came to protecting one of the most important individuals, most well-known individuals on the planet. A former president, likely the guy's going to be the next president. Looks like you guys were cutting corners. That's what it looks like to me.
Cutting corners.
I am
You'll
here today
never be a
because I
slice
want
of
to answer
cheese.
questions, but I also want to be cautious.
You might want to, but you haven't answered. I don't think you've answered one question from the chairman, the ranking member, or me. Well, we got a lot of other people asking. We'll see if your record improves. But right now, you haven't answered, I don't think, any questions. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
You done pissed him off. He yield. I don't even want to talk to you no more because you done pissed me off. I'm mad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the summer of 1963, as a law student, I traveled to the South to work in the civil rights movement. When I arrived,
Miss Norton about to get in your ass. She just said something about the civil rights movement. I don't even know what she about to say, but she about to get in your ass.
in Jackson, Mississippi, I was met by a civil rights activist who showed me around town and tried to convince me to work in Jackson that summer. I recall talking with him and his wife about the raw atmosphere in Jackson. Later that day, he took me to the bus station for my trip to my assignment. That night, he was assassinated outside his home. His name was Medgar Evers. I condemn the political violence. It is a threat to democracy. I want to discuss one of the roots of political violence, guns. For years, Republicans, including a member of this committee, have introduced legislation and amendments to repeal or block the District of Columbia gun violence protection laws, including its bans on assault weapons and large capacity magazines. The shooter at the Trump rally used the mass shooter's gun of choice, an assault weapon, specifically an AR-15 style rifle, and presumably a large capacity magazine, which is defined in DC as a magazine that can hold more than 10 bullets. Under current DC law, DC does not recognize concealed carry permits issued by other jurisdictions, but it does issue concealed carry permits to both residents and non-residents. However, DC imposes a number of requirements on concealed carry applicants, including suitability, such as not having exhibited a propensity for violence or instability. Moreover, DC residents restricts where the guns can be carried, such as a political demonstration near the White House and Naval Observatory or near
She going somewhere. She going
people
somewhere.
under Secret Service protection, provided the permit holder has been given notice. This week, the House is expected to consider the fiscal year 2025 Financial Services and General Government Appropriations Bill. This Republican drafted bill would allow an individual with a permit to carry a concealed handgun issued by a state or territory to carry a concealed handgun in DC, regardless of that jurisdiction's permit requirements. A Republican has filed an amendment to that provision to allow such an individual to carry a magazine of any size with that handgun. In short, the pending bill and amendment would allow any person with a carry permit issued by another jurisdiction to carry a concealed handgun with a magazine of any size in any location in the District of Columbia. The Secret Service is responsible for protecting a large number of people and facilities in DC. Director Cheadle, would Secret Service protectees in DC be safer or less safe if people who have exhibited a propensity for violence or instability could carry a concealed handguns in DC?
I think being a Secret Service agent and an officer or a law enforcement officer in any state is difficult. They are required to make decisions and snap judgments in the blink of an eye. And I think that the officers and the agents that work here in the DC area do a great job of monitoring the public
She
and
mad as hell.
reacting to threats as appropriate when they arise.
She read all that shit off that paper.
Secret Service protectees in DC be safer or less safe if people in DC could carry concealed handguns with large capacity magazines?
I think,
Damn.
ma'am, that
what
we
kind of question
work
is
in
that?
parameters where we travel around North America, and the rules on open carry and concealed carry are different from state to state. And that is part of what the Secret Service takes into account when we develop a security plan. Obviously, anyone that comes into one of our protective sites, we would establish magnetometer support, metal detectors that personnel would have to process through, eliminating that potential.
Would Secret Service protectees in DC be safer or less safe if more people could carry handguns
Same question.
in DC?
I think, again,
question.
as I stated, ma'am, we want to make sure that we provide a safe environment
Which
for all
one?
of our protectees, and whatever measures we would need to put in place
So
for
which one?
a secure site, we would do so.
I yield back.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the chairman of the
Damn,
House Intelligence
that's
Committee,
all
Mr.
too.
Turner from Ohio.
Director Cheadle, your opening statement.
She just read all that shit and you ain't answer her question. How dare you?
Indicates that the Secret Service constructed a security plan for the site in Pennsylvania. I'm assuming that security plan would also include the security footprint for the site, but it also would be based upon a threat assessment for the threats associated with Donald Trump and the crowd in attendance. Would it not include a threat assessment?
Yes, it would.
So that threat assessment, as we know, basically would have started with, there's a generalized threat against Donald Trump because he is a presidential candidate. Then it would have gone to, he's a former president and he gets security coverage just as Bush, Clinton, Carter, and Obama do. And then you also have the heightened political environment. Even for those, it's clear that the security footprint, that the threat assessment was insufficient, which permitted then a 20-year-old to actually enter with a weapon and shoot Donald Trump. But I want to ask you about two other aspects of the threat assessment. It is known and public that Iran is a threat risk for Donald Trump. They're a threat risk for John Bolton,
former Secretary of State Pompeo and Donald Trump, because they have indicated they want to assassinate them as a result of retaliation for the killing of Soleimani. That is both for Iran a generalized threat. They're targeting these individuals, but also most recently a specific threat to Donald Trump himself. Now, I want to enter into the record by UC a Department of Justice Public Affairs release, a CNN article, an article from Fox News, and an article from CBS, all of which acknowledge
Without objection to order.
that this threat exists for Donald Trump from Iran, and that there are specific threats, most recently, that have been acknowledged.
Right.
Director Cheadle, have you read the intelligence of the generalized threat to Donald Trump by Iran as a result of their desire to retaliate for the killing of Soleimani?
Hell no.
Soleimani.
Hell no.
Have you read or been briefed about the intelligence of the specific recent threat to Donald Trump from Iran?
Hell
Yes, I
no.
have.
Director Wray, when we were getting our briefing, indicated that he thought the threat assessment should have included this threat from Iran. Is it your testimony today that the threat assessment, since you've read this intelligence, was sufficient to protect him from this threat from Iran?
My testimony today is that the information that we had at the time was known.
Was it sufficient? Director Cheadle, was it sufficient
Was it?
for the Iranian threat that you
Was it?
said you have read the intelligence briefings for?
Was it?
that information was passed to,
Well, I'm not asking the
Tell?
bureaucratic issue
No,
of
we ain't
who did
asking
it
that
get passed
bullshit.
around to. Director Cheadle, was it sufficient for the
Cheadle.
specific and generalized threat to Donald Trump's life from Iran?
Was it?
yes, I do believe it was.
Director Cheadle, is an Iranian assassin more capable than a 20-year-old?
Sir, I think we've acknowledged that there was gaps and a failure that
What?
day. We are
When I
not,
raised this issue with Director Wray, he was incensed. He was shocked that the threat assessment of Iran did not seem to be, as we and I discussed, baked in to your security footprint and your threat assessment.
They on your
And he
ass.
went on to say that the generalized threat that he has told the whole country that we are under from a potential terrorist threat. He has said we're under the highest threat level since 9/11, that the lights are flashing red. And he has specifically indicated that people have crossed the southern border as a result of the Biden administration's policy, and that there are in our country today terrorists and individuals who are affiliated with terrorist groups and organizations. That would be a heightened threat environment, Director Cheadle, would it not?
Would it?
yes,
In his public statements, he has said he is making these statements because he wants people to take them into consideration in threat assessments, specifically. Now, that would be a threat not just to Donald Trump, but it would also be a threat to the crowd there, wouldn't it?
Yes.
yes.
Are ISIS terrorists and Al-Qaeda terrorists and international groups and terrorists more capable than a 20-year-old in pulling off their mass shooting or an assassination of Donald Trump?
Sir, again, there was clearly a breakdown
Right.
and a failure that day.
Have you read the intelligence of the terrorists that are currently in the United States that Director
Do
Wray
you
speaks,
read books?
and those individuals that are here that are affiliated with terrorist groups and organizations that are in the process, as Director Wray said, of representing a
About what he
significant
saying?
threat of a terrorist attack occurring in the United States?
That shit.
I have read reports that apply specifically to the Secret Service's mission.
Director Cheadle, because Donald Trump is alive, and thank God he is, you look incompetent. If Donald
Oh,
Trump
wow.
had been killed, you would have looked culpable. There is no aspect of this that indicates that there has been any protection to Donald Trump. The threat was identified before he took the stage, and the shooter was only killed after Donald Trump himself was killed. Should you resign? If you refuse to do so, President Biden needs to fire you.
Oh,
His life, Donald Trump's life, and all the other people which you protect are at risk because you have no concept of the aspect that the security footprint needs to be correlated to the threat. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts.
he ain't
Thank you,
say
Mr.
how
Chairman.
you.
Director Cheadle, there were multiple security failures at the former president's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania.
You need
First
some
of all,
water?
there was a failure to isolate the podium from exposure to direct fire. Do we know who made that decision to to allow that rooftop to remain as an unprotected area? Do we know who came up with that security plan that omitted that?
Sir, I don't have a specific person to identify for
Okay,
you.
well, that's what I'm
Blah,
looking for.
blah,
So let's move on. There's also a breakdown in security in failure to confront the shooter over an hour before the former president began his remarks, when the shooter was identified as a person of interest. What particularly allowed agents or law enforcement to identify him as a person of interest?
So I appreciate the question. And again, I will say that we are 9 days out and there are a
You
multitude of
keep-
interviews that are
you
still
keep-
taking
Okay,
place.
so did he have a range finder? There were some reports that the individual had a range finder. That would certainly raise my suspicion. Did he have a range finder?
Yes, he did, but may I explain that at a number of
All right, hold up, y'all. I gotta say this. Man, you keep whistle blowing out your ass. Shit.
our sites, especially when you're at outdoor venues, a rangefinder is not a prohibited item. It is sometimes an item that is brought in by individuals if you're
But
going to be in
did
the back.
anybody confront him on that? Anybody ask him questions? What are you doing with the range
Cap.
finder? Anybody confront him on his presence where he was in proximity to the president?
So again, to my knowledge, I believe that that was the process that was taking place, was to locate the
Did
individual.
they confront him? Did they go up to him? Did they talk to him?
I do not have those details at
Okay,
this time.
those are important details. There was also a failure to communicate between law enforcement to act quickly upon information provided by either local law enforcement or rally attendees that the suspect was positioned on the roof. There were minutes of delay before any meaningful action was taken, even though he was several hundred feet from the podium. And this was obviously minutes before the shooting. Let me ask you, there was considerable delay in removing the president from the podium after the shooting began. He was shot in the air. It was still over a minute before he was removed from the stage. Meanwhile, this shooter had multiple clips, several clips. He got off 8 shots, and he had the capacity and the ability, if he was not neutralized, to basically mow down that whole Secret Service detachment as well as the president.
That's how you know something was staged.
What, from your own investigation, caused that delay under the circumstances?
What I can tell you is that when the agents identified that the shooting was taking place, in under 3 seconds, they threw themselves on top of the
I understand that
president.
there was heroism there. No question about it. No question about it. But protocol would indicate, and these are the opinions of various former Secret Service agents, people who have done this work in the past, that over a minute of exposure on that podium with a shooter with a high capacity weapon who had already wounded the president and could have got off, we don't know how many more rounds, and yet the president remained exposed, even though he was joined in that exposure by the Secret Service in their heroic acts. It just, I don't know if there's a good explanation for that.
Right back.
It just, I don't know if there's a good explanation for that.
Our personnel created a body bunker on top of the
I get
president,
that. I get that.
shielding him.
Yeah, this was an AR-15 style weapon that would have made pretty quick work if he was determined and able to do so. This is not the first investigation that we've had of the Secret Service during my time here on this committee. And the last one we had, our previous investigation determined that the Secret Service was experiencing a staffing crisis that poses perhaps the greatest threat to the agency, and that's a quote. Is that staffing crisis still in place? Is that still something that you deal with on a daily basis?
As of today, the Secret Service has just over 8,000 employees. We continue to hire, knowing that we need to ensure that we keep pace with
What would be the full complement of,
And gentlemen, time's expired, but please answer the question.
I'm sorry.
what would be the full complement that you're looking for? You've got 8,000, and how many would be a full complement for the service?
So we are still striving towards a number of 9,500 employees approximately in order to be able to meet future and emerging needs.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your courtesy. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Dr. Fox from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, what grade would you give the Secret Service's performance in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13?
What is that?
As I've stated, ma'am, this was clearly a failure. I would grade the agents and officers who selflessly threw themselves in front of the president and neutralized the threat an A. I think that we need to examine the events that led up to and prior to that day.
You stated in 2021 that the Secret Service has a zero-fail mission. It's clear that the events of July 13 show a cascade of failures that cost Corey Comparator his life, nearly cost former president his life, and injured David Dutch and James Copenhaver. When an agency fails spectacularly at its mission, those responsible must be held accountable, and the problems must be fixed so they cannot happen again. Why should the American people or the officials you're responsible for protecting have confidence in your ability to lead the Secret Service after such a spectacular failure?
I appreciate the question, and I am committed to finding answers so that we can make the agency stronger after this.
You said on July 15 that the buck stops with me. How are you taking accountability for the Secret Service's failures during the July 13 assassination attempt on President Trump?
I have taken accountability, and I will continue to take accountability. I am responsible for leading the agency, and I am responsible for finding the answers to how this event occurred and making sure that it doesn't happen again.
So I would like to explore how you got the job as director of the United States Secret Service. Is it typical for the director of the Secret Service to be recommended for the role at the behest of a president's family and senior staff, perhaps at the request of Jill Biden or Anthony Bernal?
I got the job as a director of the Secret Service because I spent 27 years in an agency with a mission that I absolutely love. I started my career in Detroit. I worked my way up through investigations and protection.
Was there competition for the position?
You would have to ask those who were involved in the interview process.
But you think you are the best person in the country to head the Secret Service?
I think that I am the best person to lead the Secret Service at this time.
The Secret Service receives billions in funding each year, as has been explained by my colleagues here. In fact, you've had an increase in real terms of 55%. As you're no doubt aware, staffing levels for those assigned to protect the president, former presidents, and other senior officials has decreased by about 350 between 2014 and today. Clearly, a lack of financial resources not to blame for the staffing shortage. In 2022, the Secret Service saw nearly half its workforce leave in 1 year. And during the same year, it was ranked dead last among law enforcement agencies in the best places to work in the federal government. Can you explain why your agency was so poorly rated and why so many staff left in just 1 year?
So with all due respect, I dispute the statistic of half of the employees leaving in 2022. I think that that has been inaccurate data that's been reported out there. But what I can tell you is, as I have returned as the director of the agency, we have had an increase in hiring and staffing and an increase in resources. And we are committed to continue to hire so that we can be staffed appropriately to meet the dynamic mission that we have.
Well, you may want to dispute it, but it's out there. My given the high profile failures and rotten culture at the Secret Service during your nearly 2-year tenure, why should the American people have any confidence in your ability to lead the Secret Service to perform its zero fail mission to protect our senior leaders?
The Secret Service has an incredible culture. Our men and women place service over self. They come in every day willing to risk their lives for our protective mission, and they work investigations that thwart people who would do harm to children, child exploiters. We have an incredible mission, and our culture is we will get the job done no matter what.
Well, those on the front line certainly have a great culture, and they were willing to risk their lives for President Trump. But I'm not sure the leadership at the agency has this right kind of culture. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Conley from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I hope the American people do appreciate the incredible daily risks Secret Service agents take on our behalf. You mentioned there are 36 regular clients you've got that you protect constantly, but I was participating in the NATO summit just 2 weeks ago. We had 32 heads of government and heads of state, plus visiting heads of state and heads of government. Presumably, you provided protection for all of them.
That is correct.
Just saying. Help us understand, however, I will stipulate that there's an ongoing investigation. You don't want to go into too much detail on that until you've been able to ascertain all the facts and analyze what they mean. You can understand, however, the anxiety we and the American public have about how could this happen and how can we ensure it can't recur. Now, there are some things my friends on one particular side of the aisle don't really want to talk about, like AR-15s and access to them by a 20-year-old or anybody for that matter. Presumably, Director Cheadle, the ubiquity of weapons, guns in America, especially assault weapons or semi-automatic weapons, that's helped your job and the mission of your agencies, right? It's made it less complicated. Isn't that true?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
Real simple. More guns, especially dangerous ones, have made your job protecting people easier. Is that not right?
I think from every
Director Cheater, this is simple English. More guns, do they make your job more complicated or less complicated in protecting these 36 clients and visiting heads of state and heads of government that come to Washington?
I think the Secret Service needs to take into account.
I didn't ask that.
That
I'm sorry. I asked a simple question, which deserves a simple answer. The ubiquity of guns, dangerous weapons in America, like AR-15s, has that made your job, that is to say the mission of the Secret Service, easier or more difficult?
I think the threat environment for protecting our Secret Service protectees is always difficult, and that's dynamic and it's always evolving.
We stipulate it's always difficult. Again, this is a simple one. Does the ubiquity of guns make your job easier or more difficult today?
I understand the Second Amendment rights of individuals.
I didn't ask that question. I'm not questioning the Second Amendment. I'm asking a simple analysis, Director Cheadle. And I can tell you, you're not making my job easier in terms of assessing your qualification for continuing on as director. Please answer the question. You're the head of the Secret Service. You're speaking on behalf of 8,000 members who put their lives on the line. We just had a failure by your own admission. Do guns make your job easier or harder?
I think the job of the Secret Service is difficult on every day, and we need to make sure that we are mitigating all threats, whether that be
That
weapons,
isn't my question.
personnel.
That is not my question. And now I think you're evading the answer, which is not a hard one.
I am sorry that you feel that way, sir.
How else could I feel, Director Cheadle, when you're clearly avoiding a direct answer to a very simple declarative question? We almost lost a presidential candidate the other day. A 20-year-old had access to his father's AR-15 and got on top of a roof within 500 yards or feet of the podium. And I'm asking you, did the availability of that AR-15, which is replicated all across America, make your job harder or easier? And you're not willing to answer that question? And you think, and you wonder why we might have a lack of confidence in your continued ability to direct this agency?
I understand your question, and that's the environment.
Well, if you understand my question, why not answer it?
Because it's the environment that the Secret Service works in every day.
That doesn't tell me anything. That's the environment we work in. I had an attack on my office a year ago. I know a little bit about violence too. He came to kill me. When he couldn't, he beat one of my staffers 8 times with a baseball bat on the head. We live with the threat of violence. But a simple answer from the director of the Secret Service would be helpful. And I'm sorry you've chosen to evade it. I yield back.
Chair, now recognize Mr. Grofman from Wisconsin.
Thank you. When this guy took the shots, he climbed a ladder to get on the roof, correct?
I'm unable to answer details of exactly how the individual accessed the roof at this time.
Do you know when if he did use the ladder, do you know when the ladder was placed there? Was the ladder there 2 days before, just the night before? Do you have any information at all as to when the ladder got there?
I would like to be able to answer those questions. The FBI is still conducting an investigation.
How did the rifle get to the roof?
Again, sir, at this time, I'm unable to answer questions to provide
Have
clarity.
they cleaned the roof since the assassination attempt?
Have they cleaned the roof?
Right. Has anything been done to the roof? Is it just like it was, whatever, 10 days ago or not? Has anything been done to the roof?
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay. Were President Trump's normal agents normally assigned to him there that day?
Yes,
There was these were the same agents that were always there.
yes, sir. The people that are assigned to his detail were working on that day.
Okay, there's stuff on the internet that says they were not there that day, but these are the same agents who are routinely there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we know which agents fired the shots that finally took down the potential assassin?
Yes, sir, I do.
Can you give us those names or background of those agents?
I would not offer their name up in this setting, but it was one of our technical officers, our counter snipers.
Okay, so can we privately get those names, the committee?
I am certain that we can make names available privately.
Okay. Do we know where all the shots landed? First of all, how many shots did that potential assassin, how many shots came out of the rifle?
So again, I would hesitate to offer that information as the FBI is conducting an investigation.
Have we got the bullets from all the shots?
Again, that would be the responsibility of the FBI to collect that evidence.
Okay. Do we have the correspondence from the shooter? Has that been recovered from his phone, whatever?
Again, I would have to defer you to the FBI for details on that investigation.
Okay. You've spent some time trying to change the makeup of the Secret Service. Okay, you feel there are whatever, too high a percentage are men. Does this affect at all who you are hiring for the Secret Service?
I've spent my time as the director trying to increase the number of people that we hire in the Secret Service so that we have the best and the brightest, and that's been my concentration as the director.
Okay, you ever hiring not hiring men because of your desire to hit certain targets?
I am hiring the best qualified candidates that put in an application that want to work for our great organization.
Okay. Next question. The shooter obtained a direct sight of President Trump from the position on the rooftop. I assume that is not something that should ever happen. It should never happen. Do you want to elaborate a little on how that happened, or what you wish you had done differently, or would do differently next time there's a Trump rally?
Again, sir, the facts of this particular event are still unfolding. 9 days, there have been a number of reports that have been out there. So I do not want to provide information that perhaps would contradict something that has been erroneously reported or is not factual. But there clearly was a mistake, and we will take every effort to make sure that this never happens again.
Could you elaborate why you want 1/3 of the Secret Service to be women?
I've never stated that I want 1/3 of the Secret Service to be women.
30% or something? You had some target, no? Okay,
Would gentlemen yield?
I'll yield.
What was, Director, what was erroneously reported? You said, to Mr. Grothman's question, you said something was erroneously reported. What are you referring to?
I'm referring to their,
His question was in the context of the shooter using a ladder to get on the building. What was erroneously reported? Because you won't tell us anything, but you'll tell us something that wasn't reported accurately?
I'm saying, sir, that there have been a number of reports that are out there that have been speculation. And until we have the actual facts, I don't want to report anything that would contradict speculation that has been out there.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding.
Chair recognizes Mr. Christian Morte from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, for bringing us together this morning. One question I get asked a lot from my constituents is, what can Congress actually do to stop this from happening again? And I'd like to share a graphic from a very recent study conducted by Professor Robert Pape, a world-renowned expert in combating political violence. The graphic shows that 74% of Americans want this Congress to come together to denounce political violence of all stripes. And you can tell it's across party lines. I commend the chair and ranking member for putting out the statement the other day condemning political violence. And to further this effort, I'd like to ask all my colleagues to join Dr. Brad Wenstrup and me in introducing a resolution that we think can secure unanimous House passage in deploring and condemning political violence. And we will be circulating that resolution shortly. Director Cheadle, as you know, the shooter began shooting at 6:11 p.m. Eastern on July 13th. NBC reported that at 5:51 p.m., 20 minutes before the shooting began, the state police informed the Secret Service of their concern. Now, the rally was not paused at that point, correct?
No.
And according to NBC, just 2 minutes later, at 5:53 p.m., the Secret Service notified its snipers about the gunman. The rally wasn't paused at that point either, correct?
No.
Let me show you some video footage by rally goers. If you could play the video on the screen up here. This was taken 2 minutes before the shooting started. If you could turn up the volume.
Criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here.
Right on the roof.
It's much tougher than
Up now.
it happens.
You went right on the roof, big guy.
Up here.
Ma'am, that doesn't look like suspicious behavior. That looks like threatening behavior to me. And the rally wasn't paused at that point either, correct?
I can tell you, as I stated earlier, sir, that the moment that the shift surrounding the president were aware of an actual threat.
That's a threat right there. The guy's on the roof and everybody's yelling at him.
Yes.
And directing the officer's attention to him. The rally was not paused at that point, correct?
We are currently still combing through communications and when communications were passed.
Well, I can point you to this communication. It's 2 minutes before the shots started ringing out. Director Cheadle, yes or no? Was there ever a moment where the Secret Service actually considered pausing the rally?
The Secret Service would have paused the rally had they known or been
So the
told
answer is
there was
no.
an actual threat.
The answer is no. correct?
I can speak to you in generalities.
No, I don't
And
want
I don't
generalities. I
know
want
all of the
specifics.
communications
The
that were-
answer is no. You did not consider pausing the rally, correct?
The people that are in charge of protecting the president on that day would never bring the former president out if there was a threat that had been identified.
Well, they did, because we've now identified 3 points in the 20 minutes before the shooting that the threat emerged. Let me point you to something else, which is the building that the shooter was perched on, seen here. This building is called the AGR building. I'm sure that you're familiar with it. It's no more than 150 yards from the stage where Donald Trump stood, yet the security perimeter was drawn such that the AGR building was placed outside of it. Director Cheadle, according to the Washington Post, the AR-15 styled rifle used in the shooting had a range of 400 to 600 yards, and therefore the AGR building was clearly within rifle range of the stage, correct?
Yes.
NBC News has reported that in the days before the rally, the Secret Service had identified the building as a vulnerability that required special attention, correct?
That's reporting from NBC.
Yes.
So I am still looking into an active investigation.
I know, but it's been 9 days. I mean, you should know that, right? And yet, despite the fact that the AGR building was in rifle range stage and it was flagged as a vulnerability, this building was put outside of the Secret Service's security perimeter. And I respectfully submit the Secret Service must expand its security perimeter to account for the kinds of weapons that can be used outside the perimeter to endanger the protectees inside the perimeter, ma'am. Let me turn your attention to some conspiracy theories that have been circulating and ask you to comment on them. First, you have not found evidence that the incident was a staged shooting, right?
Correct.
And you haven't found evidence that this was a result of a conspiracy of high-ranking government officials, correct?
Correct.
And you have not found evidence that this incident was in fact directed or perpetrated by a foreign state or entity, right?
And that's the last question, but I'll let the director answer that, please.
Not at this time.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes Mr. Cloud from Texas.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm there was only one counter sniper who took one shot. Is that
We
Right.
had multiple counter sniper teams available
yeah, on the
that day.
premises, but is only one took one shot? Is that correct, or only one?
Correct.
Okay. How many spent shell casings were found on the roof?
Again, I would have to defer you to the FBI's criminal investigation.
Okay. Word is that the car was rigged with explosives.
Again, sir, I'd
Sorry.
have to defer you
To
to
the
the
FBI.
FBI's investigation.
Okay. You're not curious about, you don't communicate with them? No. Okay. CNN reported that the Secret Service did not sweep the building the shooter was used to shoot President Trump and other attendees. Is that true or false?
So we are conducting a mission insurance investigation and will depend on the information that we obtain from our investigations.
Okay. The Secret Service knew there was a suspicious person anywhere from 8 minutes before President walked on stage to 30 to 60 minutes. We have different reports. Was President Trump or his team notified of the threat?
I think there's a difference and a distinction between suspicious
person.
and threat.
Yeah.
So we are going back and looking at communications to know when the information about a suspicious person was passed to Secret Service personnel.
Okay. But was President Trump or his team notified?
Again, we are going back and looking to make sure that we have the exact information of when those notifications were made and who those notifications were made to.
Okay. I think it's troubling for a lot of us that the number one question everyone in America is wondering is why was the roof left open? And after 9 days, we should at least maybe have a little bit of that information. And when you come to this committee hearing and you don't have anything to say about that, it's very, very troubling. Did you review the security plan for this event?
I personally do not review security plans for events that take place across the country.
Any of them?
We have a number of events that
Who's
take
the
place.
top level official who reviews the security plans?
There's a number of people that review security plans.
Who's
as they
ultimately
unfold.
responsible for signing off on a security plan?
It's a conjunction of personnel. There are people on the ground, there are supervisors on the detail, there are people at headquarters.
So there's not one person who says, okay, this is good. It's copacetic, we're going for it.
I think much in the way that we build our security plans, where they are
No
multi-layered.
doubt there's teams working different aspects of it, but ultimately, isn't there an individual who signs off on the plan?
Much like how we design our security plans, they're multi-layered. There are multiple layers.
So there's
of
no
people.
accountability.
There is
Yes,
accountability, sir.
There's, this is whether it's the FBI or Fauci or anything, it's time after time after time, these multiple layers of accountability turn into layers of plausible deniability in agency after agency after agency. That's got to be fixed, because you keep coming here and expecting, yes, you're saying I'm responsible, but, and you're accountable for it, but then there's nothing. What do you mean by that? I mean, you're saying you're going to keep your job, right?
I assure you, sir, that if we determine through the course of our investigation that someone or people need to be held accountable, we will do so.
What level of, if President Biden, God forbid, had been shot and killed, would you think that was worthy of resignation?
I would do the same thing that I'm doing here, where I would want to make sure that we are conducting an investigation, that there is continuity in that investigation, and that we could find the
You
answers
do not
to
think
what
the
happened.
assassination of somebody under your details worthy of resignation?
I think that this event was tragic and deserves answers.
The thing that you've said so far is that you want to make sure that this never happens again. The thing is, everyone in America knows that's not the job description that you're tasked with. The job description you're tasked with is to make sure it never happens, period. One of your goals in the strategic plan is to champion diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. You've accomplished the accessibility part. What standards, do you keep the same standards for all applicants and all, or does every Secret Service agent meet the same qualifications, or do you have different standards for different people?
Yes, sir. Everyone who moves through the application process has to meet the same standards to become a special agent.
Okay. The trouble I think we're having with right now, so far, you gave a lame excuse for sloped roof. You said that local law enforcement's job was to cover up the building before backtracking on that. We were told that President Trump's team did not ask for security before you backtracked on that. You haven't provided the audio recording that this committee, the chairman, requested that it was due Thursday. You didn't give us an advanced copy of your opening statement, but yet there was reporting on it somewhere else. There seems to be more information from YouTube videos than you're able to provide for us. And it begs the question to anyone, you're in charge of the investigation of your own failure. So how is anybody in America supposed to be able to trust the results of that investigation as being anything transparent and genuine?
That's the last question, but please feel free to answer the question, Director.
Sir, I've been a Secret Service agent for nearly 30 years. I have led with integrity, and I follow our core values of duty, justice, honor, loyalty, and courage. And I am doing that in this case, and I assure this committee that I will provide answers when we have a full and complete report, in addition to cooperating with all of the other investigations that are ongoing.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Khanna from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the chair and the ranking member for convening this hearing on a bipartisan basis. I join them in condemning the horrific assassination attempt on the former president. I am relieved for the sake of the country that he wasn't seriously hurt and that he survived, and my thoughts with him and his family during such a traumatic event. I also want to express condolences to Corey Comprator's family and recognize his heroism in saving his daughter's lives, and to the victims of that awful event. Now, Director Cato, would you agree that this is the most serious security lapse since President Reagan was shot in 1981 of the Secret Service?
Yes, sir, I would.
And, you know what Stuart Knight did when he was in charge at the time of the Secret Service? You know what he did afterwards?
He remained on duty.
He resigned. He resigned. And Stuart Knight was not a Democratic appointee or a Republican appointee. Look, I'm not questioning your judgment. I just don't think this is partisan. If you have an assassination attempt on a president, a former president, or a candidate, you need to resign. That's what Stuart Knight did. He was a Republican appointee, and he took responsibility. And I think you need to reflect. This is not a question of you. It's a question of the American people. You cannot go leading a Secret Service agency when there is an assassination attempt on a presidential candidate. I would say that about anyone who is running. And so I guess my question to you is, what's the difference between your position and what Stuart Knight did?
What I will tell you, sir, is that I am dedicated to finding the answers to what happened. And like every Secret Service agent, we don't shirk from our responsibilities. I will remain on and be responsible to the agency, to this committee, to the former president, and to the American public.
But is there a reason you wouldn't just do what Stuart Knight did after the Reagan assassination attempt?
I believe that I provided an answer.
There's nothing more that you have to say? I mean, do you really believe at this moment, given how divided the country is and the questions asked, that your service in this role is the best for the nation? I mean, I'm not saying you can't do public service again, you can't do something else again. Do you really genuinely in your heart believe that you being in this role is what's right for America at this moment? I mean, do you think there are people who are Trump supporters who have confidence in you? The one
One second, people.
one thing that we've got to have agencies in this country that are transcend politics, that have the confidence of independents, Democrats, Republicans, progressives, conservatives. Do you really believe that the majority of this country has confidence in you right now?
I believe that the country deserves answers, and I am committed to finding those answers and providing those answers.
Well, look, I believe, Director Schittle, that you should resign. I think there are colleagues on both sides of the aisle who believe that, and I hope you'll consider it.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Palmer from Alabama for 5 minutes.
Director Cheadle, did local law enforcement ESU teams have compromise authority to engage a perceived threat?
Yes,
Why do you think they didn't use it?
I believe that they follow the same use of force that our
You
agency.
don't, when you have compromise authority, you don't have to get permission if you perceive a threat. And there were not just the ESU units, but there were local law enforcement that had line of sight on the shooter before the shots were taken. So one of my questions is there was supposed to be a briefing with the Secret Service sniper units, your counter assault team members, with the contract team, with the local ESU teams. That didn't take place. Why was that?
So I have been told that there has been a briefing.
Why
There was a
was it?
briefing that took place.
I've been told that there wasn't one.
And again, we are still looking into the facts of the investigation. So
Let
that
me
we
ask
can-
you this.
How long is the
When were
briefing?
you
9
informed
days?
that there was a credible threat against President Trump, former President Trump? When did you learn of that?
Sir, the
5
former
days
president
before.
has a number of threats.
I didn't ask you that. There was a credible threat from Iran. When were you informed of that? Answer the question.
We have been monitoring the threats
You
for the
knew
former
before,
president.
you knew before the rally, okay? All right? The site security plan is generally drafted by the site supervisor and the site agent, probably out of the Pittsburgh district office. Did they take into account the credible threat against President Trump?
Our personnel take into account
No.
the threats that are
Then
out
why
there.
would they leave a building? And I will correct the distance that's been quoted. It was about 140 yards with clear line of sight to the president. Why was that building not occupied on the roof? I mean, you could have put Barney Fife on the roof and kept somebody from getting up there. So why wasn't that done?
The plan that was developed that day encompassed a number of
ma'am.
security mitigations.
The issue is the site supervisor, the site agent, and the special agent in charge, who I think signed off on the plan, did not include that in the inner perimeter, and they didn't have a plan to secure the building. As I understand it, the Butler County ESU unit was situated on the second floor of a building next to that, but they didn't have a clear line of sight of the roof. The angle was too severe. The photograph that was taken of the young man, of the shooter, when he had the rangefinder, was taken at 5:15. It wasn't until 5:38 that that photograph was transmitted to the Secret Service sniper units. I don't understand the lack of interoperability here in the communication process. I don't understand why people didn't perceive that as a credible threat. The video that Mr. Christopher Morphy had shown there was clearly a credible threat. So how is it that all of these mistakes could be made? How many explosive devices were found on or near the site?
Again, I would have to defer you to the FBI.
Madam, I believe
details
they
of
were
that.
in his car, and I think there might have been one near a main gas line. It wasn't just the fact that he had a rifle. It was the fact that he had the ability to inflict enormous harm, enormous numbers of casualties had those devices exploded. I want to know also, when your agents conduct a site review, are they fully informed of all of the threats that are being made against the principle that they're protecting?
What I can tell you is that when our agents go out to conduct an advance, their whole goal is to ensure
I
the safety
understand
and
what their goal
security.
is. The failure to secure that building not only put the former president's life in danger, it put the lives of individuals in the crowd in danger as well. I mean, the Reagan shooting, there were other people shot at that time as well. And the Secret Service members' lives were in danger. So I don't understand how you can continue to stay in the position you're in when this was a failure of historic magnitude. 43 years without anything like this happening. And you failed, in this case, in a spectacular way. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Mfume from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to commend you and the ranking member on your joint statement and for holding this hearing that we might all at least attempt to try to get some answers. Some of us, Ms. Cheadle, grew up in an era not too unlike what we see today in terms of political violence. And some of us remember the November 22nd, 1963 assassination of President Kennedy. Some of us, like myself, remember 2 days later when Jack Ruby on live TV shot and killed Lee Harvey Oswald. We've seen over and over and over since that time these kind of attempts, whether it was the assassination of Martin Luther King or Bobby Kennedy, or the attempted attack on George Wallace in Laurel, Maryland, the shooting in 1981 of Ronald Reagan, our friend and colleague Steve Scalise shooting here in DC, and the unfortunate attack on Paul Pelosi, and now this matter regarding former President Trump. Let me try, if I might, to take another walk at this. People just assume that whoever is in charge takes full responsibility when there's never been, at least on this magnitude and scale, this sort of failure. So when members ask you, are you going to resign, and you say you have no intention to, they are perplexed, like many people who watch what's going on. And there's some things I just don't understand. Why was the building, the ARG building, placed outside of the perimeter when clearly it was close enough for someone to launch an attack?
So again, sir, we are looking into all of the details of how the advanced was comprised, but I can tell you that there was overwatch on that building provided that day.
By a drone?
I'm not going to get into the specifics of technology or assets that were used in this
Well,
forum.
I think it's fair to say the Overwatch failed because the shooter got up on the roof and stayed there for a while and people had pointed him out. So do you think that your Overwatch was a failure in that case?
I think that we need to know the full details to understand how this occurred.
And why was the rooftop left naked to begin with? Can you tell us that, considering it was within the line of sight and so very close?
Again, I can't speak to the specifics of this particular event site, but what I can tell you is that when the Secret Service develops an advanced plan, they take into account a number of factors when they're building their advance. If there are buildings or areas of concern, and Overwatch is one of those mitigations that they want to put in place, then they will cover off areas of responsibility.
I understand that, but the shooter came to the attention of your agency 52 minutes before the former president got to the stage. Did anybody get assigned to watch or cover that individual who had already been seen with a advanced finder on him and other suspicious matters? Was anybody assigned to track him?
So what I'd like to clarify is that a suspicious individual
I got that part.
was
It's not a
brought to
threat.
the attention
I know.
of our personnel. And again, having a rangefinder at an outdoor event.
Well, let me ask you this. When the suspicious person was brought to the attention of the Secret Service, was anybody in the detail ordered to follow and stay with that suspicious person just because they might become a threat?
So we have a number of teams that are on the ground. And again, we are trying to verify the timelines of when those notifications were made to our personnel so that they could assume the responsibility of trying to track that individual.
Ms. Cheadle, there has been a lot of discussion, some of which raised itself earlier in this hearing about poor staff morale within your agency. And I have the July 17th report of Government Executive, which is a credible reporting service for the federal government for employees. And the 2023 ranking of places to work within the federal government showed, and this is through the Office of Personnel Management, that the Secret Service came in 413th out of 459 sub-agencies and agencies. Can you explain that?
Certainly. What I can tell you is the Secret Service is a difficult job. It challenges our employees daily. It's holidays, it's weekends, it's no leave periods.
But, madam, people come to work knowing that. You do explain that when you hire somebody. They know that. It's the same with other agencies. They miss holidays, they come to work at odd hours. But to be worked, one of the worst places to work within the federal government, 413 out of 459? I just need an explanation. What do you think as the director there?
I think that this
And that's the last question, but please answer Mr. Mfube's question.
I think that this is a challenging job. I think that it's a challenging environment to be in law enforcement, and we do have a no-fail mission. And our folks are tasked with that every day, 365 days of the year. But I can tell you, I've also taken a number of measures since I've been the director to recruit and retain and stem the tide of attrition in our agency, which will hopefully alleviate some of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Sessions from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I join in the calls of all of our members to say thank you for doing this hearing on a bipartisan basis. Director, I'm not going to sit here and say you ought to resign, but I am going to say that you have not given us confidence that you have the ability to understand what happened, to take the responsibility in terms of understanding. You've spent a number of years. How many years do you say you've been with the agency?
29.
Well, I spent 16 years with AT&T, moved 7 times with them, and had a really good feel about their operations, how they worked, what was acceptable, who was responsible. And I've heard you say today numbers of times, well, you've got to wait. Well, you've got to wait. Wait for the final report. When is the final going to happen?
I
I
am
mean,
very
how long do we have to wait before you can give us credible answers. You've been there 28 years. You've had a few days to be able to draw your own analysis of this. You should understand the entire process. You talked about being on the team, perhaps in Georgia. You have talked about your experience in this. You've talked about the professional nature of the agency. That I don't doubt. But the director, just like it was when I ran my operations at AT&T, was responsible for making sure they worked. And in business, it either works or it doesn't work. There's no in between. It either works or it does not work. And your job as the, in essence, administrator, the director, is to make sure it looks right and works. And I've not heard you say one thing about my analysis is I have asked these questions. It's always, I've got to sit back and wait for someone else to decide that. So I'm going to ask you a question that maybe you can answer. Have any employees been disciplined for their role in Butler, PA incident?
No, sir, not at this time. I am asking those questions. I
So
assure
no
you.
employee has been disciplined and no employee has been placed in any position that would place their job in jeopardy nor their standing in the agency.
We are still in the process of
That's
interviewing
not what I
people.
asked. You're the person that runs the place. You're the person that knows right from wrong, good from bad. You've had a number of days and now you come before this committee knowing you're going to be before us and you've got to slough it off to someone else. Do you see where there was something that went wrong as a professional at an agency with 28 years, or do you have to count on someone else to give you the final report?
I see that something went wrong, and I've acknowledged that something went
Then
wrong.
what went wrong?
I
Was
need
the
to-
special agent in charge not doing their job? Was the shooter was the shooter given extra time? Was the sniper doing their job? I mean, these are things that people who've been around for 28 years can analyze quickly. I watched it live on TV and then within minutes saw a number of facts and factors that would have and should have been known by people who were there. You've got 28 years. You're showing up here telling us and the American public, well, I've got to wait for the final answer. What is your evaluation?
I'm asking those same questions.
Well, no, you're before the
And I assure-
committee. Tell us what went wrong. A special agent in charge, the person who was there. Tell us and don't try and play a shell game with us. Do you have the ability to effectively, as the director of this agency, to understand what went wrong and at least tell us, I do or don't know what I'm doing? And we come away with, and I'm not asking for you to resign. I'm asking for you, if you've got this experience, then you should be able to say to us, we know what we did wrong. It was a failure in our system, and we're immediately making these corrections. That's why you're having a difficult time with this group of members of Congress, because we saw it too. We've seen the things, but you are the 28-year expert. You are the person that, and only you, that can make the changes. And I hear you say, well, I've got to wait for a final report before at 28 years experience. That is why we think what you're doing, the answers you're giving us are not correct, and you are not using your professional expertise. Mr. Chairman, I will allow her to respond.
I am asking those same questions, sir, and I assure you, when I have a full and complete report of exactly what happened, there will be accountability, and we will make changes.
Before I recognize the question, just out of curiosity, Director, it's been 9 days. Every American wants these questions answered. Do you have a ballpark estimate of when what Mr. Sessions asked you would be able to answer?
So I can tell you,
Time-wise?
I can tell you on our mission assurance internal investigation, we are targeting to have that completed within 60 days. There's also an external investigation that is going to be taking place. There are a number of Office of Inspector General investigations as well, and we are working in concert. And then, of course, there is the Department of Justice, FBI criminal investigation.
Chair recognizes Ms. Ocasio-Cortez from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, respectfully, what you had just laid out about 60 days we are currently of an especially concentrated presidential campaign in the moment. That is also paired with, of course, elections happening across the country. And of a report coming out in 60 days when the threat environment is so high in the United States, irrespective of party, is not acceptable. And I think it's very important to understand that. This is not theater. This is not about jockeying. This is about the safety of some of the most highly targeted and valued targets internationally and domestically in the United States of America. So the idea that a report will be finalized in 60 days, let alone prior to any actionable decisions that would be made, is simply not acceptable. It has been 10 days since an assassination attempt on a former president of the United States, regardless of party. There need to be answers. Again, this party, this committee, this is not a moment of theater. We have to make policy decisions, and we have to make them now. We do. And that may be and that may require legislation. That may require policy that we must pass in the immediate term. And without that, we are flying blind. So the lack of answers and the lack of report is just simply not something that we can accept here. Director Cheadle, is there a standard perimeter that the Secret Service establishes around an event, or are those perimeters independently determined per event and scenario?
There is no standard. Every event and every venue is different and treated as such.
So each event has a different perimeter that is established depending on the logistics of that event. Now, you established earlier that the building upon which the shooter operated from was outside of that established perimeter, correct, for the Butler, Pennsylvania event?
It was outside of our secure perimeter, yes.
Now, that building was, I believe, 500. How far away was that building from the president?
It was approximately 200 yards.
200 yards. Now, the individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of about 400 to 600 yards. My question is, why does the Secret Service perimeter, why is the Secret Service protective perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States?
There are a number of weapons out there with a number of ranges. Again, an advance was completed. The determination of the perimeter, I'm not going to speak to specifics, but there are a number of factors that are taken into account when we determine our perimeter. Some of it has to do with terrain, some of it has to do with buildings, some of it has to do with assets and resources that are available.
And so what I'm hearing is that a perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of Secret Service protection.
A perimeter was established, and even though there were buildings that were outside of that perimeter, it wasn't just that building, there were a number of buildings in the area, and there was overwatch that was created to help mitigate some of those buildings.
Respectfully, Dr. Cheadle, as well, as a person who has experienced an enormous amount of threat incidents, including incidents that have never been reported publicly, there is a common pattern that happens here, whether it's Secret Service, FBI, Capitol Police, local departments. After a critical security failure, we often hear there will be an independent investigation. That independent investigation gets set up. Usually the expectation is between 2 to 3 months after the incident, and then nothing really occurs from there. The report is usually not satisfactory to the questions that are usually being raised here. And most importantly, corrective action is rarely taken. Um, if I were to state anything that I think is profoundly important, is that we need to have answers to the public. Ideally, I would encourage you and the agency to be more forthright with the members that still have yet to have their questioning, because the public deserves to have full confidence, and the stakes are too high. The violence that could break out in this political moment, regardless of party, in the event of someone getting hurt, constitutes a national security threat to the entire country. Thank you, and I yield back.
Could I go back to something you
Yes,
said?
please. Feel free, Director.
Ma'am, if I could just speak to something you said at the outset when you started your questioning. I want to assure you and everyone on this committee that I'm not waiting for a report to take action. We have been conducting analysis all along, and we have been adding additional features to our security details since this incident occurred.
And I'd hope you can highlight and illuminate what some of those are in the event of other members questioning as well.
Very good. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I request unanimous consent for that photo to go into the official record.
Without objection to ordered.
Thank you, Director. Your agency has a no-fail mission, and on Saturday, July 13th, your agency spectacularly failed. The failure resulted in the death of Corey Comprador and serious injury to two other rally attendees, David Dutch and James Copenhaver, besides the injuries to President Trump. It is unfathomable that a 20-year-old on the radar of Secret Service and local law enforcement before President Trump went on stage was able to climb onto the roof of a building with a rifle and fire off multiple rounds before he was neutralized. Was Mr. Crooks acting alone?
Again, I would have to refer you to the FBI's investigation.
Was he just a lone gunman?
I would have to refer you to the FBI's investigation for motive.
What did the Technical Services Division determine was going to be the event perimeter?
Those are questions that we are asking, and we are
I mean, you're sitting here today. Come on, Director. Everybody said this. You knew you're going to be asked that question because it's been asked multiple times. So this is an easy one. What did they determine was going to be the event perimeter? So you should know that. I mean, this is not, gee, I got to wait till someone else tells me. What was it?
Again, I don't want to speak to specifics of the event.
Okay,
that
this
took place.
this is a specific.
I understand.
This is a specific that you ought to know. As someone who said the buck stops with me, I'm going to stay in my job. I'm going to give the answers to the American people, and I know what happened, except for you're not going to tell us. And you're not going to tell the American people. And you yourself said in an interview that foments this notion of conspiracy theories. Guess what? When you sit here and repeatedly tell people, hey, I have to wait, as it frustrated everybody on this committee, guess what? It undermines your credibility and whether you're really going to get to it. So I'm going to ask you again, what did the Technical Service Division determine was going to be the event perimeter?
We are still gathering reports. We are interviewing individuals.
You know what it is, though. No, you're just not going to tell us, right?
When I have those details, I will most certainly share those.
Was the gun already on the roof, or did the shooter carry the gun up with him?
I do not have that information at this time.
Well, when was the last sweep of that roof done prior to the rally?
I do not have that information at this time.
So how many holds? I mean, so most of us here have been in events, and Secret Service has been there. There's been security, and I can't tell you how many times we've said there's going to be a security hold right here. So we're going to wait, and we wait to 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, and yet we're hearing from you apparently that there were no holds in place. So ever instituted here with President Trump's going on stage, and you said. And this is, I think, connected with this. You said they hadn't adjudicated the shooter to be a threat. He was adjudicated to be a suspicious person, even though we got some dynamic video that Mr. Krishnamurthy put on the video for us. So I guess my question for you is, and I think you answered this, I just want to see if you're consistent with what you said about an hour and a half ago. What do you do if a suspicious person is identified by the agency?
So at a number of our events, it is not unusual
I know it's not unusual. What do you do?
Those individuals that are identified as suspicious, we will send teams out to.
Was
lo-
a team sent out here then?
There were teams that were sent to identify and interview that individual.
They were sent to interview the individual who's scampered up in camo on top of a roof within 130 yards of his target. And did your team get there? When did your team get there to conduct that interview?
I don't have the details on the timeline. It is my
So,
understanding.
so if they did send a team and they're going to interview him, and you described that earlier as an investigation, why didn't they put a security hold on President Trump going on stage at that rally?
At a number of our protective sites, there are suspicious individuals that are identified all the time. That
And they-
doesn't
but-
necessarily mean that they constitute a threat.
Of course not. But here you got a guy scampering up the side of a building on top of a roof. It's identified to you, and you said you sent a team there, and you can't answer that. And this gets to one of my finer points, Mr. Chairman, if I can make it, and that is, we can have these kind of interview sessions, 5 minutes. Everybody gets a kiss at the pig, 5 minutes, and she gets to stonewall us, not deliver answers. So we say, okay, we're going to put together a congressional committee, a blue ribbon committee. Same crap will happen. I am calling, and I'll support that, but I will tell you this, I am calling on the speaker to give us and put together a truly independent commission of qualified former Secret Service agencies, presidential and VIP protective services people who can actually conduct this kind of investigation and give us real answers, because I don't think you're going to give us those answers. You should have come today ready to give us answers. I call upon you to resign today. And I also would say I've got a bunch of UC requests, if I can go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Proceed with the request.
Thank you. I apologize. It might
That's all right. Go ahead.
It might take a moment.
Very important.
Anthony Guglielmi, the Secret Service spokesman, one from him.
Without objection, so ordered.
Article, U.S. Secret Service says it previously denied Trump requests for additional resources, New York Times reports.
Without objection, so ordered.
Secret Service says it denied earlier Trump requests for more federal resources.
Without objection, so ordered.
Secret Service acknowledges denying some past requests by Trump's campaign for tighter security.
Without objection, so ordered.
Preliminary findings by Senator Ron Johnson and his committee.
Without objection, so ordered.
Articles entitled, Notice Anything Different About Trump's Secret Service detailed. Next, former Biden official corrects herself after saying Dems must turn their fire on Donald Trump to beat him. Secret Service director says buck stops with her, but she will not resign. Disney Star Wars Mark Hamill cracks joke about Trump's ear bandage following assassination attempt. Biden, I haven't engaged in inciting rhetoric. Trump has. I'm just talking about threat to democracy. Piece called Who is Secret Service Chief Kimberly Cheadle? Charlemagne the God says Trump solely responsible for violent rhetoric that led to attempt on his life. Video actress Amanda Seals pushes conspiracy theory Donald Trump assassination trip was staged. Report Secret Service identified rooftop as a potential vulnerability days before the rally. Watch BlackRock removes ad showing former President Donald Trump's would-be assassin. Why does the Biden administration have 100% confidence Secret Service after assassination attempt? Secret Service director, we didn't put snipers on the roof because it was kind of sloped. Here's what Thomas Matthew Crooks did in the days leading up to Trump assassination attempt. Secret Service director under scrutiny for diversity initiatives after Trump assassination attempt. The official story on Trump shooting makes no sense at all. Andrew McCabe says Trump assassination.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. I'm happy to assent to all of them. I just so as to facilitate.
You don't want me
our
to read?
proceedings.
Is it too tedious?
Well, we're not even really hearing them anyway. So if we could, it's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
You would like me to I'll slow it down. I was probably going too fast. Secret Service's explanations for security failures ahead of Trump assassination attempt are not adding up. U.S. reportedly received intel of Iranian plot to assassinate President Trump. What WTH, Secret Service now saying that they didn't put any agents on the roof because slight slope was too dangerous. Report, U.S. officials received intel of Iranian plot to assassinate Donald Trump before Crooks' attempt. Exclusive GOP rep Cloud. Homeland Security Agency is interfering in House's assassination investigation. Why Trump's raised fist after surviving assassination attempt is triggering the liberal media. Questions swirl over the security lapse at Trump rally, reviving old concerns about Secret Service. Secret Service scrambles to shift blame after Trump shooting as backlash hits hard. Nobody contacted me. Must see 6-camera split screen of assassination attempt captures everything shooter was in open 2+ minutes. Murillo, 5 reasons you should be angry. Breaking, shooter spotted up to 30 minutes before firing, reported multiple times. Pictures taken, no one stopped him. Cheadle calls the 30 minutes between noticing and neutralizing shooter a very short period of time. Secret Service director says buck stops with me on Trump assassination attempt, but won't resign.
Mr. Biggs, we'll stop right there. We can retake them on the next one. I know there are more, but
Okay.
without objection, we'll enter into the record all of those, and we'll take up the others after the next speaker. Chair now recognizes Ms. Brown from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to highlight certain comments from Ranking Member Raskin, my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, President Biden and Vice President Harris, and that is political violence is completely unacceptable in this country, full stop. It is an assault on our democracy itself, and I am devastated by this attack on a candidate for the president, for the office of the highest office in the land, and continue to pray for the victims of this shooting and their families. As someone who has known gun violence firsthand, no one should have to experience the pain of losing a loved one to weapons of war. It is deeply unfortunate political violence has become far too common. Whether it is the deadly attack on the Capitol on January 6th, the assault on Speaker Pelosi's husband, or the threats of violence against election workers, we all must work to condemn political violence and tone down the rhetoric. So, Director Cheadle, on behalf of the hardworking men and women of the Secret Service, can you give us some perspective as into what goes into securing an event like the rally? Like, how much time do you have to prepare?
Thank you for the question. Generally, when we receive notification that there's going to be an event taking place at a venue, the advance team assignments are made, and there is a 5-day process to conduct walkthroughs, coordinate with staff, local staff, and whether it be campaign staff or the protectee staff, and then with local law enforcement on where the perimeter is going to be, the size and the scope of the event, how many attendees there are going to be, if it's an indoor rally, outdoor rally, what sort of assets are available locally, what sort of assets the Secret Service can bring to bear, and what the scope of the event that the staff is trying to accomplish.
So to that point, how many agents were recommended or requested as opposed to how many were assigned?
So I'm not going to get into specifics of how many were assigned, but those numbers that were requested were provided.
And how many local agents were involved in the preparation, if you will, that you talked about, that 5-day preparation?
So there were a number of local agents from the local office, as well as agents from the former Trump detail that were involved in that advance process.
Do we have a number?
I do have a number. I'm not going to release that number in this setting.
You're not making this easy for us. This is a shocking incident on the former president's life and an appalling instance of political violence and a threat to our democratic values. I'm thankful that the former president is on the mend. And again, I'm grieving for the family and friends of Corey Compatore, who lost a loved one in this shooting and now know the unbearable pain of gun violence. I really hope this serves as a reminder about our responsibility to attack policies, not personalities, to be honest and truthful, and to treat one another with dignity, respect, and thoughtfulness. And with that, I yield my remaining time to Ranking Member Raskin.
Thank you, Ms. Brown, for those very powerful and moving remarks. Director Cheadle, we don't want to lose a presidential candidate to an AR-15 attack. We cannot lose a presidential candidate to an AR-15 attack, and we can't lose any more citizens to AR-15 mass violence, mass shootings. And we certainly don't want an attempted AR-15 assassination or assassination attempt to set off political violence or riots in America. So this is deadly serious business. The vice ranking member pointed out that a report in 60 days won't do it for us because we have a responsibility. Members of Congress have a responsibility to take action now if there's anything we can do to prevent this. So my question for you is, what is informing your operational decisions right now that you've invoked without a report? Can you tell us what are the preliminary judgments, or if you don't want to foreshadow the report, fine. What are your personal professional judgments informing the operational decisions you're making right now?
Certainly, and I appreciate that question. I don't want to make any preliminary judgments on what happened on this particular day, but I can tell you that we have looked at, as we did immediately in the aftermath, what the security plan for the Republican National Convention was going to be, and we made adjustments to the interior of the perimeter there. We looked at the protectees that we have here in the Washington, D.C. area and our protective sites, and we did make some adjustments to their security posture. And as we continue to move through the next several weeks, even yesterday with the announcement of the president no longer running, we have made adjustments to the vice president's detail. We are already prepared for an eventual VP nominee, and we continue to make those assessments. I think it just shows how dynamic the environment is that this agency works in every day.
So you've made the same kinds of common sense judgments and intuitive recommendations that members of the public and members of Congress are asking about right now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
And before I recognize Ms. Mace, I have to say, Director, we're pretty close to the halfway point during this. You answered more questions with an ABC reporter than you have with members of Congress. We have a lot more questions. The American people are demanding that we get answers to those questions, and that's what the purpose of this hearing is today. So I'm sure a lot of the questions that have already been asked are going to be asked again, and hopefully we can get some answers to those questions. I strongly implore you to answer those questions. You're here with a subpoena, and we expect you to answer the questions. Chair now recognizes Ms. Mace from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, the American people are watching, and they're wondering if there are any questions you can answer honestly today. So, Director Cheadle, I have a series of questions, very specific questions. I want very specific answers. Most of my questions are going to demand a yes or no answer. Do you understand?
I do.
Okay, my first question. Both sides of the aisle today have asked for your resignation. Would you like to use my 5 minutes to draft your resignation letter, yes or no?
No, thank you.
Was this a colossal failure?
It was a failure.
Yes or no? Was it a colossal failure is the question, yes or no?
I have admitted this is a terrible.
This is a yes or no series of questions. Was this a colossal failure, yes or no?
Yes.
Was this tragedy preventable, yes or no?
Yes.
Has the Secret Service been transparent with this committee?
Yes.
Would you say the fact that we had to issue a subpoena to get you to show up today as being transparent, yes or no?
I have always been eager
Yes
to
or no?
come
You didn't
and
want to
talk
answer
to
the
committee.
question. We had to issue a subpoena to get you to show up today. That is not transparent, by the way. You stated earlier, Secret Service is not political. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say leaking your opening statement to Punchbowl News, Politico's Playbook, and Washington Post several hours before you sent it to this committee as being political, yes or no?
I have no idea how my statement got out.
Well, that's bullshit. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record articles by Punchbowl News, Political Playbook, Washington Post, all done at 5:24 a.m., 6:12 a.m., 6:34 a.m., a solid 3 to 4 hours before this committee got your statement.
Without objection to ordered.
Okay. Is the Secret Service fully cooperating with our committee?
Yes.
Okay, you say you're fully cooperating with this committee. On July 15th, this committee sent you a list of demands of information that we wanted. Has the Secret Service provided this committee a complete list of all law enforcement personnel that were there that day? Have you done that? Have you provided a list to the Oversight Committee? Yes or
I
no?
will have to get back to you on that.
That is a no. Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th? Yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. No. You're full of shit today. You're just being completely dishonest.
Mr.
Chairman,
Completely
Mr.
dishonest.
Chairman.
I want to,
Mr. I'm
Come
gonna
on.
we have to
continue.
maintain decorum in this committee,
Any,
no matter
have
how
you provided
upset we
any and
get.
all memos to this committee that we've asked you on July 15th? Have you provided all memorandums within the Secret Service?
I would have to get back to you on
That is a no. You are being dishonest or lying. Like you're being dishonest here with this committee. These are important questions that the American people want answers to, and you're just dodging and talking around it in generalities. And we had to subpoena you to be here, and you won't even answer the questions. We have asked you repeatedly to answer our questions. This isn't hard. These are not hard questions. Have you provided us all communications from the Secret Service related to that day and that rally? Have you provided this committee? We've asked for this information on July 15th. Have you provided any of this information that this committee has asked of the Secret Service? Any of it?
I'll have to get back to you.
Have you even read this letter that we sent you? Did you even read this?
Yes.
Okay. And you have said you don't know, you have no idea. The answer is no. We haven't gotten a single document or piece of information or data from you or your agency in related to the rally that we have asked you for. So was this attempted assassination of Donald Trump a failure of training or execution or both?
I think that those are answers that we need to
Training,
examine.
execution, or both? Which one?
I think those are answers.
All
we
right.
need
How
to
many
determine.
Secret Service personnel have lost their jobs due to this colossal failure?
At this time, none.
How many Secret Service personnel have been required to take a refresher course on how not to let people shoot Donald Trump?
Our personnel are currently operational. We are examining the facts of this investigation, and we will make the changes necessary.
What time did law enforcement become aware that there was an individual on the roof with a clear line of sight to President Trump?
I am still verifying timelines.
Of course, 9 days in, you have no answers. How many minutes went by between the time law enforcement saw and took photos of crooks and the shooting? How many minutes?
I am still verifying timelines.
57 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Before I recognize Mr. Stansberry, I believe I want to recognize Mr. Mfume for a unanimous consent.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg your indulgence. I meant to do this earlier. I'd like to have unanimous consent that it be submitted for the record. The 2023 ranking of best and worst workplaces in the federal government, compiled by the Office of Personnel Management, which shows the United States Secret Service coming in, again, as I said earlier, 413th out of 459 sub-agencies. And this appears in the July 17th edition of Government Executive.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Ms. Stansberry from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by just saying that part of why you have bipartisan agreement here on the dais about the severity and importance of this hearing is because this is not just a single shooting. This is about national security and the security of our democracy. It's not just one operational failure. This is about our public officials safe. And what does that signal to our country and to the world about American security and the ability of our officials to do their job safely? So I want to start by saying thank you to all of our brave men and women who are in the uniform, whether it's the Secret Service or local law enforcement, who put their lives on the line. I think obviously we honor their service, but this is really about operational failures and what it means for our country at large. And I also want to reaffirm that we must condemn unequivocally political violence of any kind, not just political violence, and that it cannot be tolerated in this democracy. And also to offer my prayers for the slain Fire Chief Corey Comprator, and also prayers for those who've been injured. Now, I think, you know, the tone of this hearing is, how is it that a 20-year-old young man with a gun that was legally purchased by his father could, on the day of a rally, go to a gun shop, legally purchase ammunition, show up to a secured site, and then not only attempt an assassination of a political figure, but kill and injure 2 others? How could this happen? I'm not asking yet. I think we've had a lot of testimony here today. I want to talk a little bit about the time and other law enforcement. So I respect some of the details that are currently being investigated, but I know you were on the call because I heard you on the call and you heard them too. So I'm going to lay out the timeline a little bit. On July 3rd, the rally was announced that it was going to be in Butler. On July 6th, 3 days later, we know that the shooter searched for dates for Trump and DNC events. On July 7th, so this is 4 days after the announcement, the shooter went to the site. He actually physically went to the site. On July 12th, the shooter went to a gun range where he and his dad regularly go and practiced shooting. And the next day, on July 13th, he went to the site again before the rally began. We know that he then went and searched online for a gun store, where he went and he purchased 50 rounds of ammunition, went home, got his father's AR, which was legally purchased, and returned to the venue. At 5 p.m. that evening, this is more than an hour before Donald Trump actually took the stage that evening, local law enforcement were made aware that there was a suspicious man. In fact, at 5:20, local law enforcement flagged that he had a rangefinder, and they radioed their concerns and sent around pictures of the individual. At 5:40, 20 minutes before local law enforcement actually identified the shooter, and at 5:51, Secret Service was notified of the suspicious person by the state police, and 1 minute later, they distributed that information. That was before Donald Trump even took the stage. That was 11 minutes before he took the stage. So the Secret Service was aware that there was a suspicious person. At 6:03, he took the stage. At 6:09, rally goers, as was shown in the video, identified this gentleman climbing on the roof. At 6:11, 3 shots were heard, 3 rounds of shots. And of course, the president and the other victims were shot. This shooter was a 20-year-old young man, no criminal record, legally purchased gun and ammunition, who for days in the lead up to this shooting was searching mass shooters. He even had a picture of a mass shooter on his cell phone the day of the shooting. He searched for explosives. He searched high-level officials. So the American people want to know, how did a 20-year-old young man with access to a military-style weapon actually bring it onto an unsecured perimeter, who for days had been planning a mass shooting event? And I think that, Madam Director, with all due respect, the answers that we've received here in this hearing today are completely unsatisfactory. How could this happen? We need answers. We need answers not just for the family members of the gentleman who was killed and those who were injured, but we need answers for our democracy. Because as others have stated here today, we are in a highly politically charged environment right now. We are only weeks away from one of the most significant presidential elections in American history. And it is clear that our public officials' safety has not been secured. And it is not just a matter of one shooting, it is a matter of national security. So I hope that you will take our comments to heart. I hope that there will be accountability, and we need answers. And with that, I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. LaTurner from Kansas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, I have a question just right off the bat. Something that you've bragged about repeatedly is that you've increased protection for the 36 individuals that the Secret Service is also entrusted with. Is that correct?
I think I stated that we currently have 36 protectees and that we continue to make evaluations on where those levels of protection are provided.
You've mentioned specific increases in protection that you've provided for some of those individuals, correct?
Correct.
Based on what?
Well, some of it has been as a result of the tragic incident that occurred on the 13th. We went back and reassessed where we were at in providing protection and wanted to make sure